Luke Schoonmaker, Eric All. They're both phenomenal. I've said this, and I truly believe it. I mean, they could be two of the best in the entire country.
Hello there, and welcome in on this Thursday. It's the Maize and Blue Review, Michigan Football Today. I'm Dennis Fithian, joined as per usual on Thursdays by former Wolverine, number 85, Jim Scarcelli. Scar, it is great to see you on this August Thursday. How are you?
I'm great. You can smell it. You can smell that it's football time, man. I'm a former coach talking to some of my buddies that are coaching. It's just that time. You just feel it. Your body just automatically senses football. See, I don't need to look at a calendar. You just know. And I like he's talking about them tight ends, man. Michigan, tight end you, boy. You want to play tight end, you come to Ann Arbor.
Well, Scar just talked about it there. That was Jim Harbaugh, if you didn't know, on the In the Trenches pod this week, talking about some of his tight ends. We're going to talk about all of the tight ends, in addition to some other things. We're always talking about Michigan football. There was the thumbnail from today, if you want to take a look at it, if you didn't see that before coming in. You got Eric All up front. There he is. He had a heck of a season. You know, he was one of those guys that people talk about in the summer a lot. Like, this guy's going to explode. And then last year, Scar, he did explode. Yeah, we're going to talk about those tight ends. Also, Matt Weiss, Michigan's co-offensive coordinator. I think that and I think most people think he's going to be the one calling the plays. Also, Michigan scrimmages, what they'll try to get done between now and September the 3rd, when they have inter-squad scrimmages. And then something coming out of practice was a short yardage package that Michigan looks to be potentially sprinkling in with one of their freshman quarterbacks, and that is Alec Orji. And we will discuss the possibility and the likelihood that you could see number 10 as a true freshman under center in the backfield for the Wolverines. That's a lot to talk about, Scar. You think we can handle it?
We'll get it, man. Good stuff. We'll have some good thoughts. Wisdom, man. Wisdom. That's what we're trying to bring.
Well, let's start with that Michigan tight end room, and it's loaded. You know, I put on the screen, there's people listening on the podcast, and for people that are watching live, you can always get your comments in, and we will put those up on the screen. You got a question for Jim, the coach, the former Wolverine? You can go ahead and we'll put that question up in real time, and he'll answer it. The two top guys that Harbaugh talked about, you know, Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker, they do head the list, but then there's a long list of potential tight ends that could see some time. And I even worked in a couple of the non-scholarship guys in 82 Bredesen, who really played well, distinguished himself in the spring game. He made enough plays where you could see him being involved. And then 89 Carter Selzer is also, I believe, a walk-on, but he was in a lot of action last year. And if he didn't, he must have had at least two that I can think of, maybe three pretty nice plays that were called back. And so, he could be in the mix as well, number 89. Now, Schoonmaker must have changed his jersey, because that is a picture of him, but I think he is 86, unless I've messed that up.
Yeah, I tell you one thing. What I see, when I see Michigan tight ends, I see not one guy on that list is an imposter. You know what I mean by he's not just a slot guy. He's not. Some of these other teams' tight ends are totally different than a Michigan tight end. Our guys are all going to be asked to come down and block a big 300-pound five technique at times, lead up in through on a linebacker. Our guys play in the line of scrimmage. So our guys are true tight ends. So this is why, the NFL is going to love these guys. They got, I saw they had Eric All and Schoonmaker both listed as potential third-round picks. That's a great deal to have two guys picked that high because they're getting a total guy. They're getting a total tight end that can block a big, defensive tackle. Go ahead, Denny.
Well, no, Scar, it was something that one of your former teammates said to me. He said, "Hey, there hasn't been a guy with bigger arms at Michigan since Scar played than Schoonmaker." He said, "It's just Scar to show, the guns there." And Schoonmaker, it really does show, though, when he's out there. I mean, and you can see the picture of him. He does have some guns there. He is not just a pass-catching tight end. He is somebody that'll get involved in the run game, no doubt.
Schoonmaker is, and so is all. What they really demonstrate, though, is the Ben Herbert, the weight room, the 4 or 5 years in the weight room. I mean, that's what you're seeing. Because when I look at these young tight ends, you can see they just haven't been in the weight room, man. They're just, they just haven't. They're not going to block down on a big defensive end like these guys can. So you see the weight room, you see the development. Here, the great thing about our tight end room, and there's an upside, but there's a downside. The great thing is we've got 3, 4, and 5th year guys that are going to get the majority of the reps that are proven really good blocking tight ends. 2 of them have caught a lot of balls. They actually threw the ball to Honigford last year a couple times. So he's not just a tackle playing tight end. You don't want that. But the problem with having 3 really good ones is how do you get because all 3 of them will be gone next year, is how do you get these young guys some reps? How do you get Hibner, Hansen, Bredesen, Loveland, Klein, Carter, all the names you have on your list? How do you get them reps is a challenge for the coaching staff. But I love that room. There's potential there with the young guys. But anyway, that's one of the downsides with having so many of your top guys being all guys that could be gone. All 3 of them who are going to get the majority of the reps could be gone. So you got to find ways to get them young guys reps.
Well, and that is the advantage. That's one of the advantage of having the easy non-conference schedule this year. Michigan, with those first 3 games, all of these guys should be able to get snaps. We're looking at a ton of tight ends here, but there's no need to play Eric All in the 4th quarter of Colorado State if Michigan is up, 45-6. I don't think you need to put Luke Schoonmaker in there. That's where you get Hibner. That's where you get Hansen. That's where you get Loveland. You get Klein, the 2 true freshmen. You get them a chance. Whoever distinguishes themselves between now and September the 3rd. You've got 3 games like that where you're going to see a lot of these guys, at least to get their feet wet.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that our follower indicated there. That's a great thing about those games. We got to get a ton of guys, a bunch of reps. I read an article. One of the writers was talking about, all had a great year, or Schoonmaker had a great, and they based their decision. They're writing their article, or they're basing how well a year a guy had as a tight end based on how many catches he had. And I just think that's wrong for a Michigan tight end. We ask these guys to do a lot of things. And I think it'd be wrong to just say, we're going to evaluate how good a year he had based on, did he have 15 catches or 32 catches? Our guys are blocking defensive ends. We're blocking linebacker. Our tight ends, they really have to be do-it-all guys, because we ask them to block 300-pound 5 techniques, and we also ask them to block 180-pound corners that are fast as heck, and safeties and lead through on linebackers. We put them in motion and block anybody at the line of scrimmage. We have them crack 1 techniques and 3 techniques at a time in the Jim Harbaugh offense. So our guys at the tight end position, there's not an imposter in that tight end room. They are asked to block anybody on that defense, and you've got to be physically tough enough and athletic enough to block all those different defenders.
Yeah, I don't know who the writer was, and you're spot on. You got to be able to do both of those. There is, though, a position. I don't know if any of these guys, technically you would put them in there. You'd just call them a pass catching tight end, where you wouldn't want them in there in the run game. But certainly All and Schoonmaker and Honigford was a tackle. You could put him in there. I'm not familiar with Hibner or Hansen and their body styles, and if you would put him in more of a, I don't know, Tony Gonzalez, even though he was big. I mean, Tony Gonzalez wasn't asked to block a whole lot. He was out running patterns.
Yeah, but Denny, when you have a guy who is a tight end who's a former tackle, and he doesn't catch, they don't throw it to him, Defenses know it. It helps you. I eliminate that threat. If you have a guy in at the tight end position next to a tackle, and he's got a number 80 jersey on, but he's a wide receiver, and he's an imposter, you know they're not running the ball over there. So again, you start to eliminate plays as a defensive player. It's like this guy, so he's not blocking anybody, so I can start marking plays off of the list. So the last thing I want to defend as a coach and as a player is a guy who can do everything. The Gronk, the Shoemaker, the Alls, those are the guys that you don't want to defend because they're the run threat, they're the pass threat, they can block anybody on your defense. Those are the guys. That's why they're picked, to have, high picks, these guys. In the Michigan, the tight ends, that's what we ask them to do.
Great point. And Michigan is stacked. And, Jim Harbaugh, mentioned that he thinks that they could be, Brock Bowers, that's the tight end for Georgia. He's probably the best in the country. You mentioned Gronk. There's a tight end that plays for Notre Dame. They call Little Gronk. I mean, he's looks like the real deal too. And there's a couple more out there, but do they have the depth of an All and a Schoonmaker and then starting to go down the list? Michigan's got a great tight end room.
Yeah, that kid was a good tight end at Georgia. We faced him, and he's a heck of an athlete. And they put him out in space, and they get mismatches. And we do that with our guys too. And that kid's a pretty good blocker too. But hey, our guys are we don't have lamb chops in there. Our guys can play too. We can spread them out and get mismatches too, like in an empty formation. See how they match up. Some of the things Georgia did against us.
Yep. You want to answer some questions, Scar?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Adrian thinks Shoemaker would be a good pro. Yeah, you look at him; he's got the size, he's got the speed. He's showing that he's a big, tough, dual threat guy. We don't have any imposters in that tight end room. Go ahead, keep going. Antoine agrees with me. Which of our young tight ends do you really like, Dennis? He's asking you, Dennis.
Well, so All and Schoonmaker are off the table. I mean, Honingford I know is a converted tackle. I haven't seen, I have heard a lot of good things about Lewis Hansen, but I haven't seen it with my own eyes. It's the same thing with Hibner. If I had to pick out of the guys that you see that you don't really know, I would pick 81 Lewis Hansen. He's the one that I hear the most about, but I would like to get my eyes on him myself so I can make my own determination. All was somebody that I heard a lot about, wait till you see this guy. I mean, he is not only big, but he is fast and he's making play after play after play. I mean, this is when he was, and then, they said it again, but then, he dropped the ball a few times in some big spots and it affected his confidence. And then last year he put it all together.
Yeah, I couldn't even come close to answering that question until we see these kids play. So we'll be looking as we go through that first game, and we'll be looking who's the fourth tight end, who's the first young tight end in the game, and then we'll hopefully get to look at all of them. And we're going to look at do they block? That's what I'm going to be looking at. I want to see are they tough enough to block? Can they block a linebacker? And if we throw it to them, can they catch it? And Denny, so much is about confidence with the catching the football, everything's about confidence. And that, you're right. You hit it right on with All. He just needed more reps. He needed to relax, catch a few footballs. And now the kids just doesn't drop anything. So he's got the confidence. He's going to catch everything.
If I had to put my money on who would be the third tight end, it would be the guy that actually I did see in the spring game, and that is Max Bredesen, 82. He did look good when we just saw him in the spring. Antoine says you can throw jump balls to Colston Loveland. He's 6'5", and he has already flashed in the preseason practice, according to Antoine, talking about flashing. Maybe.
Yeah, you can't coach 6'5", man. I remember being at practice one time, and I was watching young Zach Gentry when he was just being converted to tight end, and I was talking to old Jack Harbaugh. He was at practice, and we were talking about him, and I said, Coach, that kid is always open. But what I mean by that is when you run your, we call it a getaway route, a hook, there's a couple terminology they use when a tight end just takes a little 5-8 yard vertical and the linebacker has to cover him. There's not many linebackers that can cover a 6'8" kid like Gentry. And the same thing with a 6'5" kid. You get a mismatch, just like Gronk. He's always open when there's a linebacker trying to cover him. It's just like playing basketball. You got to position yourself so the quarterback knows where to throw the ball. So that's why you like your height. And he's absolutely right. Anyway, about the jump ball possibilities with tall receivers.
I love it. Let's move on and let's get to what Matt Weiss had to say this week, the co-offensive coordinator for Michigan. He was asked about his vision for the Michigan offense, and I will read it for people that are also listening or just on the podcast. Here's Matt Weiss. He said, "Our vision is directly from Coach Harbaugh. It's an all-weather conference. You're going to have to be able to play in the cold and rain, and certainly running the ball is part of that. Running the ball sets up the pass game. It's a lot easier to throw the ball when you can run the ball. It's a lot harder to throw the ball when you can't run." And now here is Jim Scarcelli on what he heard and saw from Michigan's first-year offensive coordinator, Matt Weiss.
I think it's beautiful stuff. It's totally an intelligent statement, and it tells you that the vision really is Jim Harbaugh, our offensive structure, our philosophy. And I see it. I've been watching Jim's teams play for the last 15 years or so, and it's got a little bit of that Stanford playing a phone booth type stuff if you want, and it's got some of that spread stuff he started to put in with Kaepernick, and some of that stuff. It's got a little bit of the quarterback run. But anyway, he talks about all weather. Yeah, you got to play in the grass on rain, and in that Ohio State game was everything that we talk about. You got to be able to have in windy conditions and be able to run the ball and do different things. And that's where we're at. And that's what we're trying to get to and continue to perfect. And yeah, I like listening. I think that they're going to have, and that's how it was when I played too. You had Coach Hanlon, you had Coach Moeller when he was with the offense, or Coach Shadell and Coach Bo, and those guys talked and they decided on plays. I don't know if Bo ever gave a title to a guy, but Weiss and Moore, they will have a collaboration. Maybe Moore will look more at the run game threats that they think they should attack, and Weiss will look at more of the pass game stuff. I don't know how they're going to have it delegated, but they'll have a good working relationship with Coach Harbaugh, and it'll work, man. Them guys, they always find a way. I coached it like that too. I let my two offensive guys call plays. I never called the play once as a head coach. So they'll have a formula to work, but that's why we have to have the run game that is all weather, man. You got to be able to have the short pass, the quarterback run, and all those things help you when you have the big windy day where no one's throwing the ball. And then what are you going to do when they got two receivers out there and two receivers out there and nobody's covering because it's windy as heck? Don't blame the kids, because you can't do anything. You can't throw it when you have this, this offense that's so geared around passing the football.
Scar, you're telling me when you were the head coach, if it was, 4th and 1 from the 50 and the offensive coordinator said, let's go for it, you were always just like, okay. You never said, no, we're going to punt here, or vice versa?
Oh, no, that's a different situation. No, you're asking me. No, I made those decisions. Okay, but he would ask me, are we going for it on 4th down? And I said, yes. I would say yes or no. I didn't tell him what play to call, though. Okay. That was I wanted to, give them authority, and no, but the decision whether we were going to punt or go for, that was my decision. They picked the play, though, and I never second guessed them. You got to give guys, you got to delegate and hope they make good decisions.
Now, and there's a lot of focus on the short yardage back for Michigan, and it was because Hassan Haskins had that role, and he was so good at it last year, and he scored so many touchdowns. Michigan and everybody that's watched, we know that Blake Corum is really good, and we also know that Donovan Edwards is really good, but the focus on who is going to be that third guy really is something. And if you're a team, like, this offense looks really good, but being able to pick up a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, maybe they're at their own 45 and it's a half foot, the plays that they figure out here in this fall practice and then put in whatever that sheet is going to say, whatever they feel good. They do have a couple games. I would imagine that they will try a couple different options to see, who really can pick up those plays. And, it's like the 2-point conversion. You got to have a couple of those 2-point conversions in your back pocket. You better feel pretty good about what you're going to do on 3rd and 1 or 4th and short.
Yeah, I think we're in a good position there. Edwards will be a year stronger, a year longer, another year in that weight room. He'll get coached up on securing that ball, and he'll be a threat in there too for short yardage. And I think Corum will give us that too. Some guys just have a knack, though, of finding that little seam in the short yardage stuff. Some guys are a little better in the open field, but that young linebacker that they moved to running back is good too. So we'll see who the third guy is. But I think that you'll see both Corum and Edwards in there eventually, where we don't want to get to the point where we take this guy out of the game. But you're right. It was the other guy was getting most of the short yardage reps last year, Haskins.
Yeah, while you're talking about personnel, Scar, here's a question for you. Who should be starting at quarterback?
I'm not. We didn't get to see any improvement from JJ in the spring, so we don't know how much he improved. We're going to have to base it on what we saw in the past. So I don't know what he's doing in the spring, in this early camp now. If he's showing a lot of improvement, the big thing with JJ, the coaches have to evaluate is, okay, this other guy led us to a Big Ten championship. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. The young guy, though, he's got the legs, he's got the feet. He puts stress on defenses. So, that's the coaches have to balance those decisions. Hey, this guy is a pain for the defenses because he does give the run threat. He can avoid the rush a little better. But the other guy is pretty darn smart, and he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's a pretty accurate passer. So, me, from what I've seen, I'm going to stay with the guy that doesn't make mistakes. That hasn't shown to make too many mistakes, throwing, inaccurate passes, and he appears to get the team in the right play, and he makes a lot of smart. We haven't had a lot of handoff issues with McNamara, which is so crucial. It's all about turnovers, man. Turnovers is so crucial that I want from that position, and sometimes it's simply getting the snap from the center. Or getting the ball handed off properly to running backs. Turnover, that position, secure the football, man. So I'm going McNamara until I see if JJ is giving me a lot of improvement.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to point out because there's a lot of people that are reminding folks about the quarterback battle that McNamara late in the season started throwing the ball. Like, he did a really good job. All the things you're talking about, no negative plays, no miscues, getting the team lined up. But then there were some interceptions late against Iowa, against Ohio State, against Georgia, a fumble there, a pick here. So that was something late in the year that he had. I don't know if you want to say it was issues, but, he wasn't as secure and as, great as he was in those previous games. But let's move over to Antoine, who has a question or a point. Scar, he is saying that Michigan needs to look back at Bill Walsh, his old offensive play schemes, throwing out of the backfield to the running backs. We can do that running counters. We can do that and have all the traits of the old 49ers offensive West Coast style. What do you think about Michigan running the West Coast offense? A little, some ingredients of the West Coast offense.
Yeah, Bill Walsh understood, man. One of the hardest things to do in football is tackle in the open field. That was a lot of his offensive philosophy. Throw high percentage short passes that are easy to complete, and let's see if this linebacker can tackle in space. And that's Antoine makes a great point. Mullings is great. Brano here talks about Mullings. He's shown it in the spring. He's a pretty tough kid. He played linebacker. He's the former Haskins guy, same type of deal. But, Denny, these scrimmages are getting going, and they're so crucial. I'm just putting myself in those positions of those players that I was in years ago, and it's so crucial for so many guys right now to really, make a stand, take a stand, and say, look, this, and try to elevate yourself, because There's a lot, you look at that the inside defensive line room, there's 9, 10 really, really good players. They're battling for those 4 spots. And we kind of know who the 2 top guys are. But who's going to get the rotations? And that is going on at every darn position group. So here's another thing that is so crucial that the coaches are like, I remember going to the stadium. We used to go to the stadium and have the big scrimmages, preseason scrimmages like this time of year in the fall. And we might be up there for 4 hours. And because Bo wanted to look at everybody, he wants to give every single guy a chance to scrimmage at the stadium and really look at guys and see how they performed. And I'm sure Jim is doing the same thing. So he can look at these freshmen. So there are freshmen that are going to do some great things. So here's what's going on now. So there's going to be some upperclassmen that might be battling for that second position. Okay. And if these guys don't show that they're really worthy of maybe being a backup, the coaches are going to have to, they might say, look, if we're going to go with the young guy as the backup instead of playing this 4th-year guy in some situations, they might do that. If they're getting the same performance, they might go with youth because they always have to be thinking about the future. You know what I mean? That's one of the things I talked about with that tight end room is I want these young tight ends to get reps. So that's kind of what's going on in these scrimmages. These freshmen, some of them are really going to stand out. And the coaches are going to like, wow, okay, this kid's better than we thought. And now we might say, you know what? We might put him in front of this junior who is a second string guy. And that's how you end up getting the transfers and all that kind of stuff.
Great points. Those freshmen. I recall back, you mentioned going over to the stadium. There was one time my phone rang and they said, you can go to practice and it's over at the stadium. And I was expecting other media members being there, but there was no one else from the media. I don't think there was anybody else sitting in the stands, just me sitting in the stands. And they said, look, if anybody gets hurt, you can't say anything about that. The other stuff, you can't really talk about any of the plays or formations. I'm like, yeah, great. But there was a player at Michigan named Steve Breston. He was a true freshman, and he ended up redshirting. But at this particular practice, they punted to him, and he weaved in and out of the defense. He did a couple figure eights, took it to the house. They came out there and was reading the punt return team, or the kick return team, whichever it was, the riot act. You got to put this guy on the ground. They punted to him again. He took it to the house again. I don't remember anything else about that practice, but I just remember afterwards, I said, I'm thinking, Steve Breston's going to be pretty good.
Yeah,
that's what I took out of that. My expertise, my expert opinion coming out of the practice.
Yeah, these coaches can recruit guys, and you think he's going to be a certain type of player, and most of the time you're right. But there's guys that really just wow. I'm going to quick story. I remember because I know people were talking about the young defensive lineman, the 350-pound kid, What's the kid's name? The freshman, Danny?
From Michigan, the defensive tackle, Kenneth Grant?
What's his name?
Kenneth Grant.
Okay. You know what that reminded me? So people are, right away, they're singing the praises of this kid. We haven't seen him do much at all. Okay. But the thing that I remember the very first day of practice, we did a drill. It was just a one-on-one tackling drill. One-on-one one drill, and it was filmed. And then every defensive player on the team did it. And I remember, I tackled my guy, and my coach came up to me, my position coach, and he grabbed me. He was so excited. He grabbed me and said, "You can play here." He was just making that decision based on one violent collision that he saw that he thought emphasized that. But anyway, these scrimmages are important, and you'll see young guys get elevated. I see a lot of our listeners are JJ fans, and hey man, it's a great thing we got two, and I'm going to be cheering for both of them. I don't, Jim's going to make his decision. I would like to go with the experience. That's my thing.
Ferris is using, your favorite phrase, game manager. Says Harbaugh likes game managers. Scar does not like the phrase. He doesn't know what a game manager is.
Danny, let me ask you this. When we use the term game manager, So according to be a game manager, you got to run 4.9 or slower to be a game manager. If you run 4.7, no, you're not. You can't be a game manager because you can avoid the rush. Is that kind of how we define a game manager?
Yeah, well, I think so. Is somebody that that's not making a big play, is a little bit more conservative. That you're normally the quarterback is it's always going to be the most important player, but not like in last year's Michigan team. The previous 16 years, you talk about how they're going to beat Ohio State. It was like they got to play better at quarterback. That actually wasn't the case. They didn't play better at quarterback last year. They dominated up front on both sides of the ball. Michigan's identity was running the football. Now, Cade managed that really well. At no point, maybe a little bit in the second half of the Nebraska game, at no point was the game put on Cade McNamara's shoulders where they said, go on, Cade, you got to win it for us. And so he managed the game. Cade McNamara is a classic game manager. Now, and Cade, though, if you have listened to him this offseason at the different times, he has made a point that he is looking to make more plays. He has talked about getting the football down the field to the playmakers. He's basically telling everybody, yeah, I got the experience, but I'm more than a game manager.
This would be, I know we're talking about this term, but in my opinion, a guy like Lamar Jackson, he could be a game manager. If he makes great decisions, he throws the high percentage pass when it's open and not the high risk pass, because they run him a lot. He's a heck of an athlete. We know he is. But why couldn't he be referred to as a game manager who makes great, smart decisions? He gets the team in the right play. He runs the ball and gets the first down instead of taking the risky pass.
Yeah, that's the opposite spectrum, I would say, Scar. Lamar Jackson is the Ravens' best running back, and he's their best quarterback. He's their best player on offense. He's everything. Like the entire offense revolves around Lamar Jackson. He's the best running quarterback in the NFL. And he's the year that he won the MVP, he was a hell of a passer. It's the exact opposite. Like he's a big play waiting to happen with either his feet or his arm. Now you could say he manages the passing game well and, picks and chooses when to run. But, then you start splitting hairs. I would say that Lamar Jackson will be on the other end of a game manager. He's a total playmaker. That's me.
Hey, Danny, the term has multiple definitions, man. It depends on who you're talking to. If I'm coaching defense, okay, and I got my choice between defending a high risk, fast guy who runs around and does some things, or some real smart guy who doesn't turn the ball over and does all the right things, I don't know, man. You say anyway. Let's move on because we can beat this up forever.
You are right about that. Let's take it to our next screen, and that gets to a quarterback, but not the two that we have been talking about. We have pictured a true freshman QB, Alex Orji, number 10 out of the Lone Star State. If you look at his fall weights and height, 6'3", 235, he is already, you watched the spring game, and so did I. The spring roster that I'm looking at here, Orji, 6'2", 226. So he has grown an inch, and he has thrown on nearly 10 pounds here since the spring. And the word, and I will tell you this at the end of the show, I probably already should have reminded you that if you are not a subscriber to the Maize and Blue Review, if you were, you would already know all this. Michigan.rivals.com. You should be in. You should subscribe if you want to know about everything that's going on in practice up to the minute. You want to know what's going on in recruiting. Maize and Blue Review. Josh Henschke last night put in some practice notes, and one of them was that Michigan was sprinkling in Alex Orji in some of their short yardage situations, an Orji package. And what we did see in the spring game is that Orji, he looked physically like he could, like he was a senior. And, he actually, the ball looked pretty good coming out. Maybe, the accuracy needed to be a little bit better, but his arm looked good and the ball looked good coming out of there. But the one play that everyone will remember is that it was a 4th and 1, and Orji was sneaking off the left side, and they didn't get the good blocking. It was all blown up, and they got him in the backfield, except that he sprung out of the tackle and used his strength to like drag 3 guys and spring forward, and he was able to pick up that first down. So Scar, Michigan had last year, and you had Jim Harbaugh saying that Dan Villari, who was a quarterback on the roster who has since transferred, that they had packages for Villari, and it was talk like, hey, he's going to be Michigan's Taysom Hill, the quarterback down there for the New Orleans Saints, who will throw, will run, he'll be a halfback, he'll do all these different things. So the idea that you can have a freshman like Orji be that guy anywhere out on the field, a short yardage situation, whatever, for the Wolverines.
Hey, I love it. I stood next to that kid at practice. He's every bit of 6'3". He looks like a tight end. He looks like a good-looking kid, man. He's a big, athletic kid. And I love the idea of this package. I love the idea of developing depth. You got to remember, Jim has a history of wanting to run quarterbacks, man. He had Kaepernick. He ran him a lot. You also got to remember who Jim Harbaugh's brother is. He coaches the Ravens, and he likes to run the heck out of his quarterback. And they do a lot of great things with that Baltimore Ravens package. And that the offensive coordinator there, Greg Roman, was a former offensive coordinator for Jim. So running the quarterback is something Jim likes to do. He knows how much it stresses the defense. He did it a lot with JJ last year. And now we can save some of those hits from JJ if this guy can give us that same kind of threat. And defenses have to deal with it. Defenses have to prepare for it. Okay? So, let me just say this, Denny. If I'm coaching in the NFL, I'll tell you one of the last teams I want to defend, 4th down and 3 from the 3-yard line. One of the last teams I want to defend is probably the Baltimore Ravens. And that's exactly what it is. The Lamar Jackson. I had it on my notes. Who made that? Is that from you, Denny?
That is from me.
Because I had it on my notes. The Lamar Jackson package. All that inside run stuff. Okay, you can do a lot of things that get you, in that short yardage when you get the ball down in there, and you want to give the defense, the quarterback keep threat, the inside Penn State inside quarterback trap threat. But I like it. It save some hits on JJ. I'd like to see JJ get a whole series this year instead of just putting him in there and this and that. I'd like to see JJ get a whole series and be the true quarterback and let him run the whole dang offense, running, throwing. That's what I'd like to see.
Scar, let me give you a couple quick hitters. If you were going to run a wishbone short yardage situation, who would be a quarterback, and then who would be the 3 guys that you would pick from this Michigan team if you wanted to, throw that at the wall and, see what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, that's, Danny, we don't run wishbone, but we run what we run. You could ask that question, I wouldn't be McNamara because he doesn't run the ball well. If you looked at the wishbone, the Navy Army stuff, we don't do that. But we have that element in all of our formations. Every formation that we run just about, other than empty, well, even in empty, we ran it against Iowa. We have the quarterback ability to run in damn near every formation, and that puts stress on the defense. So, I've been calling for it. I was calling it for the last couple of weeks on our podcast. I wanted to see McNamara run the ball a little more, and JJ, run the general offense. But I think this is good. It's a good little package, and it also helps your defense. If we run this in practice, against our defense, we'll get better at defending some of the teams that want to do some of this stuff.
I like this point here from Ty Black, Scar, on the feedback. He says, Matt Weiss, wasn't he the architect of the Lamar Jackson running package at Baltimore? Matt Weiss was on the staff when Lamar Jackson won the MVP with the Baltimore Ravens. So he will be familiar with how they ran. The one thing about Lamar is that, like, there is one Lamar Jackson. Maybe you could put some of the things in that worked. Yeah, but it's a good point that Weiss was there with Baltimore. You mentioned John Harbaugh. Just today, I was listening to a Ravens reporter talk about, because I believe they have their first exhibition game tonight, and he said that John Harbaugh made it pretty clear that none of their guys are going to be playing, that this was going to be different than in years past, that he has made a shift. This was the reporter's idea of John Harbaugh. He was indicating that he thinks John Harbaugh has made a shift when it comes to exhibition and how much you need to get calloused or practice, especially with your top guns. You're not going to expect to see Lamar Jackson or Mark Andrews or anybody else, certainly J.K. Dobbins, who's banged up anyways. But when you hear something like that, I wonder, wow, he talks with Jim all the time. And if Jim is adopting the same kind of thing here in the fall, that maybe he's dialing it back. And college and pro are different, but you think John and Jim, these guys definitely talk a lot.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's smart. It's smart football, man. You got so many hits. Especially with proven guys. How many times does the guy have to prove himself? He doesn't. Some of those guys don't need extra reps at that. Yeah. Anyway, what were some of these people comment? Alex and JJ next year leading the way. My goodness, yeah, those are tough things to defend. But you got to be able to throw the ball too. Hopefully, he can. He'll develop as a passer. I'm going to see him throw the ball. But I like the idea. Let's see how it goes. And Ferris is talking about OSU offenses one dimension. Yes, the Ohio State has a totally different philosophy, man. They just want to. They get 4 great athletes at receivers, and they get a good athlete at quarterback, and they get these big, huge offensive linemen. They don't do a lot of different things to make you think. They don't put you in a lot of conflict in terms of adjustments. They just, cover these dudes. And it's good if you got great weather conditions and you can, throw it around. But what do you do when it's windy? What do you do then if you're having trouble throwing it? Michigan at least has some other options. And that's why I like this package. This package is saying, hey, those windy days when you can't do anything with the pass game, we're going to have some other options. We're going to give our team a chance. We're not going to blame Mother Nature as to why we lost. Like that one coach, I told you that story. How that one coach told me after a game, Denny, years ago as a high school coach, he's going to complain about Mother Nature. I said, man, I think maybe you should think twice about your offense.
Well, Scar, if we were doing the equivalent down in Columbus, so what would it would be the Scarlet and Gray review? If we were doing the Scarlet and Gray review, I would say, how about giving the ball to Travion Henderson a lot more this year? Certainly, you get a lot of the wide receivers, and you got Stroud, but look what happened up in Michigan. You got to be able to work that run game, because what if you have inclement weather, and you got a great running back in 32, and it makes your offensive line more physical, and it protects your defense and your new defensive coordinator. If I was on the Scarlet and Gray review, that's the song I would be singing this offseason. And I would be singing Blank Michigan. We hate the whole state of Michigan.
Yeah, well, Denny, I think I mentioned it when we did one of our podcasts after the Ohio State spring game. I saw a lot of Michigan formations in their offense. So they're not dumb. They're blending some of that stuff in to help their defense. But, getting back to one of our listeners talked about Weiss being the architect. Well, I would say he was on that staff with Greg Roman, who's been with, he was with Jim at Stanford, and he was with John for a long time. He was with Jim with the 49ers. So the idea of all these things they're adding to that Ravens offense is an accumulation of about 20 years of different stuff that's tough to defend with teams that want to have a running quarterback.
Antoine has a question for you. He says Ohio State's recruiting soft, and he wants to ask you a question about his theory. If Ohio is like the old Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning, all offense, no D, and that has made them soft, they are a mirror image of the Colts back in the day.
Antoine, I'll tell you what, as a former player and coach, I firmly believe that the spread offense makes your defense soft. If you're going to have to, if you run spread and your kids see spread every day in practice and spring ball, that's what they see is spread. And they don't see a lot of pulling and trapping and double teams and tight ends and all this kind of stuff. Well, they're going to have trouble defending it when they have to do it in a game. So the upside of what Ohio State does with all these athletes and all this spread stuff, yeah, it's a problem to defend, but it doesn't actually help your defense. So I think, what we're doing offensively, again, I've said it many times. If I'm going to be a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten, I want to be the defensive coordinator at Michigan, because what we do prepares our players to defend everybody, all the other teams in the Big Ten, the other 13 teams.
That is good stuff. Now, Scar, before we go any further, I wanted to ask you a question about something Jim Harbaugh said this week, and he was talking about his defense. And he said that he thought that this defense this year could be better than the defense a year ago. And he called them the no-star defense. And he had said he had seen that, in different defenses throughout his playing days. No-name defenses, no-star defense he's talking about. What did you think when you heard or read Jim Harbaugh's comments about his no-star defense?
A couple things, though. First of all, we could be better. I mean, we ran that defense for a spring under McDonald, 15 practices, and then we just kept getting better as we went along. But I know as a former player, that, even though you might have some good athletes that are, running some basic techniques that are pretty similar in football, but when you do the same thing year in, year out, you do it for 2 years, you're going to be better than you did it for 1 year. You do it for 3 years, the same techniques that we're asking these kids to do, we're going to be better. A lot of these defensive football players will be better because it's year 2. So I totally agree with that. Obviously, the downside is the enemy knows what we do, how we adjust in a lot of cases. But the idea that Jim talked about, the no name and the no stars and all that stuff, I think it's great from a chemistry standpoint. Obviously, the media likes certain players, and Jim might talk at times a little more about certain guys. But Jim does a great job and he knows it from being a former player. If he's going to talk about let's say he's going to talk about the interior defensive lineman, about these guys, this guy or that guy, he always mentions almost every darn kid in the room, because he's aware that 8th kid in the room, if he doesn't hear his name, he's going to get discouraged, and he might be a good player. So I think Jim does a great job with keeping that unity, the chemistry. And I like the idea of the media not falling in love with 2 or 3 players on the deep. I like the idea, of the media giving love to all 11 starters and sprinkling a little bit on those backup guys too. All that stuff does is create a better locker room for your team. It makes it easier to coach when everybody's getting a little love.
Yeah, and last year's team, you had Dax Hill. He was a 5-star. His brother played pro football, and so you focused in on Dax Hill, and of course Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson, a local guy. We didn't know he was going to be a number 2 overall pick, but he was going to be a first rounder. He was a star, and pretty quick, David Ajabo turned into a star. That's what you want. You want a bunch of Ajabos, not, you don't mind having returning stars, but this year's team, you'd say, well, who's the star? And you might say Junior Colson. I don't know, if Junior Colson walked by me at the park today, I wouldn't have known that it was Junior Colson. Now, if Mozzie Smith walked by, I probably would know him. I'd be like, wow, that guy looks like Mozzie Smith. But you're talking about a interior defensive lineman who might be your star of the defense. That just by, the nature of his position, that kind of screams no star. And then a guy that was a true freshman last year in Junior Colson.
Yeah, Danny, though, that's the thing with the media. A lot of times the people that want to blow up certain players, I understand coaching defense, that the position Mozzie Smith plays, the position that Hinton played last year, and Jenkins those guys, they're not going to get their name called hardly at all. They're not going to have, you look at the tackle list, and they're not going to have many tackles. And they could have had the greatest game. They could have played a great game because they just ate up double teams. They kept linebackers free to make plays. So, the idea of who's, sometimes the media falls in love with the stat sheet. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot. But, yeah, I'm looking at because nobody had a Ojabo nobody saw that coming from Ojabo. I don't think the Michigan coaches saw that coming from Ojabo.
I want to get to this comment from Wesley, who says it seems like Michigan has no weaknesses and should dominate college football and win every game by double digits. Now, Wesley, I think you're being sarcastic there, but here's the one thing about Michigan, and it used to be like this through 1969 through 2007. Every offseason, you look at the team and you say, wow, this is a really good team. It should come down to 4 or 5 plays this year. Michigan, could win the Big Ten and even more. And most of the time over that, whatever that was, 40 some odd years, it was that way. Well, they hit a little dip with Rich Rod and Brady Hoke, but it is back now to where you look at it, and this is a team that the season should come down to about 4 or 5 plays, and if they make them or not, they could be one of the teams standing there at the end. And thinking about winning all their games, their offense, it is stacked. And the other part is they've got this super easy schedule. They don't play a game. I'll say it. Scar can't say it. They don't play a game until October the 1st. All of their other big games are at home. They should be 11-0, Wesley. So I think the excitement about last year and everything else, I think that the enthusiasm and optimistic outlook for Michigan is warranted. Now, you want to talk about, well, they'll probably lose a couple games. That's fine. You can do whatever you want. Michigan fans are feeling pretty good. They got a pretty good team. They got a pretty good schedule. It's going to be a pretty good year.
Yeah, hey, Jim has everything in place, man. I mean, he brought in good coordinators to replace the 2 guys that left. We've got a lot of key guys back on both sides of the ball. That whole darn offense is almost back. We bring in the kid from Virginia, so everything is falling in place for our offense to be the kind of offense that secures the football, can run the ball, and can throw the ball. And hopefully we have some creative coaching. We did a great job with creativity offensively to put defenses in conflict. So hopefully we get the total package, coaches that put defenses in conflict and good execution, run game, pass game offensively, and then defensively. We had good schemes. McDonald was good with scheme, and we had players that made plays. We got to have guys that make plays, though. We can all look good on paper, but who's going to be the Hawkins to rip a ball out of a guy's hand like we did at Nebraska? And then who's going to be the guy like we went to Penn State? I don't even know his name. That receiver that took out their whole freaking coverage and left Alls wide open because he did such a great job running that crossing pattern. I should know his name, but it was a great. Obviously our coordinator saw it. Gaddis saw what they might be in, and we picked them off. But who's going to make those plays? You can have great players, but if they don't make plays, you're not going to have the kind of year you want to have. But the table is set. Coaching, players, depth, experience to do those things. But guys got to find a way to make those plays.
Scar, did you get your coaching whistle from your back in the day? Can you blow the whistle for us?
I don't have it with me, man. I wasn't one of them guys could just do that deal. My voice would have been gone after a couple of days of practice. That's coaches understand coaching voice. You can't even talk after a couple of days in.
Did you ever have the megaphone? But
I did try it a couple of times. I didn't like it. I got rid of it. But you want to use the whistle though. The longer I coach, the smarter I got that I can't just be yelling and screaming. And you got to use your whistle as much as you can.
That's a great point. I learned that as a broadcaster. Sometimes after a big game, I'd be on a post game. Hey, welcome in. It was a great game, and everybody's like, "Whoa, I can't listen to this." You got to take
especially as a coach, I got to go and teach 5 classes the next day too in class. So, you got to be able to talk and communicate. Brian agreed. I hear you, Scar. All right, man. I don't know what you like, but hopefully I'm giving you the real deal. We got, even though I played with guys that were 2-3 year starters, and they didn't have a great year their last year. Their 4th, 5th year. So it happens. They made plays when they were younger, but they got older. So who's going to make these plays, man? Let's secure the football.
Scar, did you ever hit a Harbaugh in a scrimmage? Like you were coming off, it would be, whatever the situation, you came in off the end and.
Hey, I don't know if I told you this Harbaugh story, but I remember this. I was like a sophomore. I think it might have been Jim's freshman year, and it was one of those scrimmages at the stadium. And we got in at the end. We were, last guys, last team, all the young freshmen, young guy. I was a sophomore, still not. But I remember this story. We're scrimmaging, and all of a sudden the offense there was like a little commotion going on in the offensive huddle. And we didn't know what was going on. And Harbaugh was getting after Coach Hanley. He didn't want to wear the pink jersey because we're scrimmaging. And the coaches, I call it pink. It was really red, but the defensive guys called it pink. Sure. Anyway, and I remember him saying, "I don't want to wear this jersey." And Coach Hanley let him take the thing off. And so he ran a few plays, and I remember drilling him on the option a couple times. But Jim was tough, man. He was physically tough, mentally tough kid. And but I do remember that he didn't want to wear the pink jersey, and he won that argument, and they took it off.
All right, Antoine, we'll get to your question about Jim Knowles' defense next week, and what Scar's impressions of it are. We'll write that one down. Do you have any last thoughts?
No, we're just getting fired up, man. We're counting it down. I know the players are they're battling like heck to move up on that depth chart, and freshmen. I know as a former coach, you always really want to take a look at those young guys, and I know those guys are getting really, really dissected because coaches got to make decisions about the old, the junior or the freshman. Because is this freshman going to pass this junior by, mid-season? So that's how you end up getting those transfers. But I'm fired up, man. It's going to be a great year.
You sound fired up. Thanks for your time.
Go Blue.
There he is, Jim Scarcelli. We'll talk to you next week.